The boardroom was supposed to be silent. Instead, it cracked open with a voice like thunder. "You don't belong here." The words shot across polished oak and glass, hard enough to rattle the water glasses lined neatly on the table. A man with silver hair, veins pulsing at his temple, leaned forward and jabbed a finger at the woman kneeling near the end of the table. A cardboard box sat by her side, half filled with family photos and framed awards, evidence of a forced exit already in motion. Executives stood frozen around the room. Some clutched papers they pretended to read. Others watched like jurors who didn't want to be chosen, but everyone heard the accusation. The woman didn't flinch. She was dressed in a cream suit, calm lines against a storm. Her posture didn't rise to defend itself. She stayed low, one hand steady on the box, the other resting on her knee. To anyone watching, it might have looked like defeat, but her eyes told another story still, sharp, measuring every second. The man's shout carried weight, but not dignity. His body lunged forward as if pushing her out by sheer force of sound. He repeated himself louder, needing the echo to make him believe he still held power. "You do not belong here." The words bounced off glass walls, reverberating against the skyline of the city outside. And yet her silence was heavier than his noise. One young associate near the doorway shifted, uneasy. His phone tilted just enough to catch the scene, the red light of recording glimmering in his palm. A woman across the table looked down, jaw tight, unwilling to meet the accused woman's gaze. Somewhere deep in the air, the first crack of change was forming. But for now, all eyes stayed on the confrontation. The box at her side looked like exile. The pointing finger looked like a sentence. And the question hung unspoken. Who really had the authority in this room? Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Her lips parted just slightly. The room leaned forward, waiting for her to defend herself. But she didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, she let the silence stretch, a rope tightening around the man's throat with every second. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, deliberate, almost surgical. "Funny," she said. "I own this." The air collapsed. Some gasped. One executive's papers slipped from his hand and scattered like white flags across the carpet. The man who had shouted froze mid-gesture, finger still pointed but stripped of its certainty. The balance of the room shifted, invisible but undeniable. And that was only the beginning. The silence didn't last. A scoff broke it sharp, dismissive. From the far side of the table, a younger executive in a navy suit smirked. "She's bluffing," he said. "If you owned this place, you wouldn't be on your knees with a cardboard box." The silver-haired man straightened his back, regaining false confidence from the interruption. His voice rose again, louder, as if trying to bury her words under noise. "You're finished here. Pack your things, sign the papers, and security will escort you out." He slid a folder across the polished table. Its corners scraped the wood like a warning shot. Inside, termination papers already prepared. She didn't touch it. Instead, she lifted her gaze, calm, steady, the kind of look that made the air itself hesitate. Her silence forced the others to reveal themselves. One by one, the board members shifted. Some leaned back, relieved to let the man play executioner. Others kept their eyes on their documents, pretending neutrality. But neutrality in that room looked a lot like guilt. At the end of the table, a woman with sharp heels and sharper words crossed her arms. "This boardroom is for real leaders," she sneered, "not imposters pretending to belong." The word imposter cut deeper than the folder, deeper than the box on the floor. A few chuckled, quick and nervous, eager to side with power. The box shifted when someone's shoe nudged it. A framed photo of her parents tilted forward, face down on the carpet. The gesture was subtle, but cruel. Still, she didn't rise, because she knew something no one else in that room had the courage to admit. Power didn't shout. It waited. It documented. It let arrogance write its own confession. Across the room, a junior associate's hand trembled around his phone. He'd been recording since the first shout. The red light blinked like a quiet alarm. His eyes darted to hers, unsure if he should keep going. She met his gaze just for a second, a silent command. Then, slowly, she shook her head. Not yet. This wasn't about going viral. This was about truth that could stand in any courtroom, in any audit, under any light. The silver-haired man noticed the hesitation, mistook it for weakness. He leaned over the table, knuckles pressing into the polished surface. You think staying quiet will save you? Silence won't change the fact you don't belong. But the truth was already shifting in the air. Her silence wasn't submission. It was strategy, and the storm had only just begun. The folder still sat on the table, unopened, its presence louder than any signature it demanded. The silver-haired man gestured to the door. "Security!" he barked. His voice cracked the air like glass under pressure. Two guards appeared at the threshold, dark uniforms filling the doorway. They didn't move yet, waiting for the cue that would justify the spectacle. A younger board member whispered, "Too low for comfort, but loud enough to sting. She should be grateful we let her work here this long." Grateful. The word hung like poison. Her hand brushed the edge of the box, steadying it as if it were ballast in a storm. She didn't rise, didn't argue. She simply held her ground, letting their words pile higher, brick by brick, until the wall would collapse under its own weight. One of the guards shifted uneasily, eyes flicking toward the woman on the carpet. She wasn't shouting, wasn't resisting. Her stillness unsettled him. Then, a voice cut across the tension, not hers. "Sir, I think her name's in the system," said a junior associate, his voice wavering but present. "I saw it this morning. Carter, executive clearance." The room stiffened. The silver-haired man snapped around, glare sharp enough to slice. "Sit down. That's irrelevant." But it wasn't irrelevant. Not to the people watching from the corners, not to the silent witnesses lining the table. Eyes flicked from the associate to the woman, to the guards, to the box on the floor. One of the board members laughed, brittle and false. "Don't embarrass yourself. She's an intruder. End of story." But the story wasn't ending. It was cracking open. The young associate swallowed hard, but his courage sharpened. "No," he said louder. "I saw it. Her clearance was marked higher than yours." Gasps. Murmurs. A paper rustled too loudly, a nervous tell. The silver-haired man slammed his hand against the table. "Enough. Security, remove her now." The guards hesitated. One looked at the other, uncertainty freezing them in place. Removing someone calm, seated, holding only a box of personal belongings, it didn't look like protocol. It looked like persecution. The woman finally raised her head. Not high, not defiant, just enough to let her words carry. "You keep calling me an imposter," she said evenly. "But the only thing fraudulent in this room is your fear." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried like a verdict. And in that moment, the tide inside the boardroom shifted subtle, but irreversible. The order still hung in the air. Remove her now. But the guards hadn't moved. The hesitation cracked the room wider than any shout could. From the far side of the table, another voice surfaced, a woman this time. Mid-level, blazer tight at the shoulders. She pushed her chair back, the scrape of metal on carpet sharp as a gavel. "She's right," the woman said, eyes narrowing at the silver-haired man. "Her clearance is in the system. I saw it too." The room shifted. Papers stilled. Coffee cups trembled in hands that suddenly didn't feel steady. The silver-haired man whipped around, his glare searching for control. "You're mistaken," he barked. "That entry was an error, a glitch. She doesn't belong here." But the words sounded thin now, defensive. The woman didn't back down. "Glitches don't carry executive override tags," she shot back. And hers did. A murmur rippled along the boardroom, like wind rustling through blinds. Eyes darted again at her, at the box, at the man losing his grip. One of the guards shifted his stance, jaw tight. This didn't feel like security protocol. This felt like intimidation. Still, the silver-haired man pressed forward, knuckles white against the table. "You see what she's doing?" he demanded of the room. "She's manipulating you, playing victim. This boardroom isn't a courtroom, and her silence isn't strength. It's a trap." The woman on the carpet didn't move, her face unreadable, posture unbroken. She let his words echo, let them clatter against glass walls until they lost their power. Because she knew something he didn't. The more he raged, the smaller he became. One of the senior executives cleared his throat, a sound awkwardly loud in the silence that followed. "Perhaps we should verify," he said. His voice cracked on the word, verify, as though he knew it could unravel everything. "Verify?" the silver-haired man snapped. "We don't waste time validating frauds." "Okay." But the word had been spoken. Verify. It clung to the air, a seed of doubt planted in every mind at the table. The junior associate who had spoken earlier looked down at his phone again. His thumb hovered over the record button, trembling. He wanted to capture the storm, to prove what he had seen. She caught his hesitation. This time she shook her head more firmly. Her lips formed two silent words. Not yet. Her stillness spoke louder than any phone ever could. The silver-haired man, sweating now, slammed the folder against the table once more. "Last chance," he growled, pointing toward the box. "Sign the papers. Walk out quietly, or you'll be dragged out." Finally, she lifted her gaze to him fully, and when she spoke, her voice was steel-wrapped in calm. "You mistake my silence for weakness. That's your last mistake." The words landed like a strike of iron. "You mistake my silence for weakness. That's your last mistake." "Oh." The silver-haired man froze for half a breath, then scoffed, forcing a laugh that didn't sound like power, only panic dressed as confidence. "Big words from someone on the floor," he sneered. But his voice no longer filled the boardroom, because across the room, a faint red light blinked. The junior associate had lifted his phone higher now, lens catching the confrontation. His hand shook, but the device held steady. The moment was no longer private, it was documented. One of the senior executives hissed, "Turn that off!" But the command came too late. Another staffer near the back leaned in, whispering to a colleague, "This is wrong. She hasn't raised her voice once, and they're treating her like a criminal." The whisper wasn't quiet enough. It carried. It spread. The silver-haired man's jaw clenched. He turned to the guards again. "What are you waiting for? Remove her." Still, the guards didn't move. They weren't blind. They saw the camera. They saw the silence. They saw the imbalance. And then, a voice broke through from the corner of the room this time. Not an employee, but a guest client. An older man waiting for a consultation. His face was lined, his tone weary but sharp. "I've done business here for 20 years, he said. "Never have I seen someone spoken to like this, never." The weight of his words dropped heavier than the folder on the table. The silver-haired man turned, startled. "This doesn't concern you." But it did. Everyone in the room knew it. Phones began to rise subtle at first, then deliberate. Screens lit up like tiny floodlights, bearing witness to a truth that could no longer be contained within walls of glass and oak. The woman still hadn't stood. She didn't need to. Her stillness had become a mirror, reflecting every cruelty, every insult, every reckless word back onto the people who had thrown them. A young woman near the door clenched her fists, finally unable to stay silent. "She's not the problem," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "The problem is how you're treating her." The room jolted. The silver-haired man slammed his palm on the table. "Enough. You're all being manipulated. She's nothing. A fraud. Do you understand me? Nothing." But the more he shouted, the smaller he seemed. And in contrast, the woman on the floor, silent, composed, unbroken, seemed to grow taller without ever rising. The boardroom wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. The boardroom was no longer a meeting. It was a battlefield of words, and the silver-haired man was losing ground. His eyes darted toward the phones, the blinking red lights, the faces no longer hiding their disapproval. Panic twisted into fury. He slammed both palms on the table. "You're all fools," he roared. "She doesn't have authority here. Look at her sitting on the floor like some trespasser. That's not a leader, that's a fraud in a suit." Ugh. The insult cracked through the room like a whip. Another executive, younger, hungry to prove loyalty, chimed in with a laugh that was far too loud. "Yeah, anyone can dress up. Doesn't mean they belong at this table. She's lucky we even let her step inside." The words stung, not because they carried truth, but because they echoed a pattern too familiar: dismissal dressed as policy, exclusion wrapped in arrogance. Her eyes lowered briefly to the photo lying face down on the carpet. For a moment, the boardroom blurred, replaced by memory. 16 years old, standing in a lobby where a clerk told her, "This place isn't for your kind." That wound had healed into scar tissue long ago, but the sting resurfaced, now proof that some storms never change. She lifted her gaze again, calm returning like steel under fire. The older client who had spoken earlier shook his head. "This is shameful," he muttered, louder this time. "You're humiliating her in front of everyone, and for what?" But the silver-haired man doubled down, pointing directly at her. "For what? For the truth. She's an imposter, a thief. Look at the way she carries herself, like she doesn't even belong in her own skin. You expect me to believe she runs this place?" Gasps rippled around the room. Even some allies shifted uncomfortably at the venom in his words. The guards at the door took a step back, as if the weight of his accusation was heavier than their orders. And still, she didn't rise. Her silence was no longer passive, it was defiance. The young woman near the door clenched her fists tighter. "This isn't policy," she said, voice stronger now. "This is prejudice." The word hung like smoke. No one could unhear it. The silver-haired man sneered, trying to laugh it off. "Prejudice? Don't play the race card here. This is business. And business is about image. People who matter don't look like her, don't act like her." That was the line that fractured the room. One of the senior executives, who had stayed quiet until now, finally spoke. His voice was low, but it carried weight. "Enough. You're exposing us all." The silver-haired man turned on him, red-faced. "You think siding with her saves you? You'll go down with her." But the tide had shifted. Phones were up. Voices had joined. The witnesses were no longer silent. And the woman on the floor, still seated, still calm, hadn't spoken a single extra word. Because she didn't need to. The boardroom itself was speaking for her. The line had been crossed. But the silver-haired man wasn't finished. He needed one more blow, one more act to crush what his words hadn't. He stooped suddenly, snatched the framed photo from the carpet, and held it high like contraband. "This," he spat, "this isn't yours anymore." Gasps tore through the room. The frame trembled in his grip, glass catching the chandelier's light like a threat. Then, with a flick of contempt, he hurled it into the box. The glass cracked against the edge, splintering across her belongings. A hiss of shock rippled from the table. Even those who had stayed silent recoiled. The young associate with the phone whispered under his breath, "That's theft." But the man only grew louder, feeding off his own rage. "Security, take the box. Remove her. She's trespassing." One of the guards hesitated. "Sir, she hasn't—" "Do it!" the man barked, voice echoing too loud, too desperate. The younger executive, the eager one, strode forward instead, snatching the box and sliding it harshly across the floor. The sound of papers, pens, fragments of glass scattering against the carpet was louder than any gavel. The woman still didn't move. Her hands remained steady in her lap, her expression unshaken. "Call the police," the silver-haired man ordered. "Tell them we have a fraud attempting to impersonate ownership. High-level financial crime." The younger executive smirked as he lifted the landline, voice dripping false authority. "Yes, dispatch? We have a situation. An intruder refusing to leave. Possible theft." Phones rose higher around the room now, no longer subtle. Clients, associates, even a few board members. Everyone knew what they were witnessing. A false report, spoken clearly into a phone, in real time. The older client stepped forward, his voice hard with disgust. "You're making a federal accusation in front of witnesses. Do you understand what you're doing?" The silver-haired man sneered, brushing him off. "I understand perfectly. We protect this institution from imposters." But the words rang hollow. The authority in them had drained away, leaving only the sound of desperation. The woman finally lifted her eyes again, calm and deliberate. Her voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. "You just made a false police report," she said evenly. "And you made it in a room full of cameras." For the first time, the man faltered. His mouth opened, but no words followed. The brittle certainty in his posture wavered, and in that hesitation, the balance of the boardroom tilted further against him. The storm was no longer gathering. It was here. The phone call still rang in the air, accusation echoing like smoke no one could clear. But this time, she moved. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out her own phone. Not hurried, not frantic, just calm, precise, like she had rehearsed this moment 100 times. She dialed. 1 ring, 2, then, "Carla," she said, voice low but firm. "Activate protocol." Across the table, the silver-haired man laughed, brittle and mocking. "What is this? A stunt? You think some assistant's going to save you?" But her tone didn't change. "Phase 1, she said into the phone. "Log the incident. Every word, every timestamp, forward it to compliance." Carla's voice came back clear, steady, professional. "Already in motion. Audio synced. Video log secure. Legal team on standby." The room shifted. Phones that had been filming lowered just slightly, their owners realizing this wasn't just a spectacle, it was evidence being built in real time. The silver-haired man slammed his fist against the table. "This is nonsense. Shut that call down." But the guards didn't move. The staff didn't intervene. because for the first time, it sounded official like procedure, not protest. The woman lifted her gaze, calm as ever. "You wanted the police," she said evenly. "Now you'll have auditors, too." A murmur rippled through the board. Someone whispered, "Auditors?" Another muttered, "She has access." The younger executive holding the landline tightened his grip, suddenly unsure. "Dispatch," he stammered. Stand by." His bravado cracked, his words no longer steady. Carla's voice carried through the speakerphone, louder now. "Phase 2 authorized. Employee records flagged. Board notified." The silver-haired man's face drained. "Board notified?" he repeated, as if the words themselves betrayed him. She didn't flinch. "You wanted to put this on record. So do I." For the first time, her silence gave way to steady words, not shouted, not rushed, but undeniable. Each syllable landed like a stone, building a wall of truth around her. The older client leaned back in his chair, a slow smile forming. "This is bigger than you realize," he muttered to no one in particular. And he was right. Because in that moment, the woman on the floor was no longer the accused. She was the one keeping score. The storm had turned. The silver-haired man was still shouting, but his words no longer carried weight. Every syllable sounded smaller against the quiet authority coming through her phone. And then she rose, not in haste, not with defiance, but with deliberate calm, as though gravity itself shifted to allow her to stand. Her cream suit caught the chandelier's glow, her shadow stretching long across the boardroom floor. For the first time since she entered, she spoke to the entire room. "You've called me an intruder, a fraud. You've even called the police. But the truth is simpler than any of that." She let the pause breathe. The silence that followed was no longer weakness, it was anticipation. Then she said it. "I am the majority shareholder of this bank. I built the institution you now sit in, and I have the authority to remove every single one of you." The words detonated without volume. Gasps erupted. Chairs scraped back. One executive's glass tipped, water spilling like a fault line across polished oak. The younger associate, holding his phone, nearly dropped it, catching it midair with trembling hands. The silver-haired man froze. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. For the first time, his fingers stopped pointing. The woman didn't move closer. She didn't need to. "Your accusations were recorded. Your insults documented. Every second you spoke was logged and sent to legal." Carla's voice crackled through the speaker, precise and final. "Confirmation complete. Majority shareholder status verified. System override engaged." The boardroom shook not from sound, but from realization. The young woman near the door whispered to herself, She owns it." The older client chuckled, shaking his head. "I knew it. Only someone with that kind of calm could sit through this storm." Phones were still raised, but they weren't capturing humiliation anymore. They were capturing revelation. The silver-haired man staggered back a step, color draining from his face. This can't be. But it was. The woman's eyes locked on him, steady, immovable. "You thought silence meant submission," she said. "But silence was the rope, and you tied it around your own neck." And if the line cut through the boardroom like a verdict. No one laughed this time. No one spoke, because in that instant, the hierarchy flipped upside down and everyone knew it. The words still hung in the air like thunder, refusing to fade. "I am the majority shareholder of this bank." For a long breath, the boardroom didn't move. Then chaos cracked open. The junior associate nearly dropped his phone again, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from awe. His live stream counter ticked upward like a heartbeat gone wild. Viewers poured in, comments flashing across the screen faster than his eyes could follow. "No way she owns it. This is history. Keep recording." Across the table, one of the executives pushed his chair back so abruptly it screeched against the floor. His face had gone pale. "She's telling the truth," he whispered, though no one had asked. "I've seen her signature on the quarterly filings." The younger executive who had mocked her stumbled backward, bumping into the wall as though it might swallow him whole. His bravado shattered. He muttered, "We didn't know. We couldn't have known." But the words rang hollow, excuses with no ground. The silver-haired man gripped the table for balance. His hand trembled against the polished surface. Authority that once radiated from him now dripped away like sand through an open fist. Meanwhile, the older client who had witnessed everything slowly rose to his feet. He clapped once. The sound was deliberate, sharp, undeniable. Another client followed. Then another. Soon, A ripple of applause echoed through the boardroom, not loud, but steady enough to shift the atmosphere entirely. The guards at the door exchanged glances. Their posture changed, not menacing, not poised to remove her, but protective. They understood who truly held power now. The silver-haired man's voice cracked as he tried to salvage the wreckage. She's manipulating all of you. Don't be fooled. But his words drowned beneath the applause, beneath the phones raised higher, beneath the whispers turning into statements. She owns this place. She's the real authority. All this time, and they treated her like nothing. The junior associate steadied his phone, eyes locked on her. "Ma'am," he said softly, "the world's watching. They know now." "Oh." She turned her head slightly, her expression unreadable yet commanding. "Good," she said. "Let them." And just like that, the boardroom was no longer his stage. It was hers. The applause faded, but the tension didn't. It sharpened, waiting for her next move. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Carla," she said into the phone, calm as stone. "Phase 3. On the other end, Carla's voice was crisp, professional, absolute. "Understood. Initiating immediate removals." The silver-haired man straightened, as if bracing for a blow he couldn't see. "What are you doing?" he demanded, though his voice shook. She didn't look at him. She looked at the guards instead. "Watch closely," she said. A chime rang from the silver-haired man's phone. He snatched it up. The screen glowed red, a CSS denied. His email, his banking credentials, his digital keys all revoked in real time. He froze. No, this isn't possible." Then another sound. A buzz from the badge clipped to his jacket. Its light flickered, then died, locked out of the very building he had tried to command. The younger executive scrambled for his own laptop. The screen blinked once, then the same red warning spread across it. His face drained of color. They shut me out," he whispered. And then the woman in the blazer who had sneered earlier checked her phone. Her voice cracked. "My account. It's frozen." Carla's voice came steady over speakerphone. "Gregory Vance, Lauren Hayes, Daniel Price. All terminated. Access revoked. Incident logged for legal proceedings." The names dropped like hammers, one after another, each syllable severing ties. The boardroom erupted not in protest, but in shock. The applause had turned to gasps, whispers, and the metallic thud of power collapsing. The silver-haired man staggered forward, desperate now. "You can't do this! This is illegal!" She turned her eyes on him, unflinching. "Illegal? You accused me of fraud in my own bank. You destroyed my property. You filed a false police report. The only illegality here is you." The older client folded his arms, nodding slowly. "She's right," he said. "I saw everything. Phones recorded every second. No one would erase this moment." The silver-haired man's knees buckled as he dropped into his chair, the weight of his own collapse crushing him more than her words ever could. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply picked up the cracked photo frame from the box, brushed the shards of glass aside, and set it gently on the table before her. Then, with quiet finality, she delivered the sentence. "Consider yourselves permanently removed from this board, from this bank, from any power you thought you had." Silence followed. Not her silence this time, theirs. The boardroom had fallen silent. Not the fragile silence from before, filled with doubt and shame. This silence was final, a verdict, a closing chapter. She stood tall at the head of the table, the cracked photo frame now resting upright in front of her. The faces inside her parents looked back at her, steady, unbroken, just as she had been. Her gaze swept the room. Every eye lowered except those holding phones, still recording, still broadcasting. The guards at the door no longer loomed. They stood at ease, almost protective, as if recognizing who truly belonged. Gregory Vance, the silver-haired man who once shouted her out of her own chair, slumped with his badge lifeless at his chest. His authority had evaporated, leaving him a husk of the power he once abused. His allies sat pale, hands trembling over useless devices, their careers extinguished in minutes. She didn't savor it. She didn't gloat. She simply spoke. "You tried to erase me in a bank I built. You mistook calm for weakness. You mistook silence for submission. But silence," she let the word hang, "is the sharpest weapon when the truth is on your side." The applause rose again, not hesitant this time, but firm, unshakable. Clients, junior staff, even some board members who had stayed silent too long. They weren't clapping just for her victory. They were clapping for the justice they had witnessed. She lifted her phone once more. "Carla," she said, "finalize the report. Distribute the footage to the board of directors and the press. Make sure no one mistakes what happened here." "Don't," Carla's voice confirmed. The junior associate lowered his phone, eyes wide. "Ma'am, you don't need us to post this. The story's already written." She looked at him, then at the others who had stood by, who had finally found courage. A faint nod. "The story isn't mine alone," she said. "It belongs to everyone who refuses to be silenced." For a long moment, she let that truth settle. Then she gathered the box of belongings, set the cracked frame carefully inside, and closed the lid. She didn't need to explain further. She had already proven everything. Before walking out, she left them with one final line, quiet, sharp, unforgettable. "I don't need a camera to prove who I am. I am the final result of every camera." And with that, she turned, steady steps echoing down the marble corridor, leaving behind a boardroom that would never forget the day its walls witnessed justice.